Welcome back to CFO Weekly, where we're talking with financial leaders about how to build efficiency in their teams, create time for strategy, and ultimately get results. With your host, Megan Weis. Let's jump right in.
Today, my guest is Matt Wolf. Matt is the CFO of ChartHop. With a background in finance, Matt's role is to help ChartHop accomplish its company growth goals with predictable, transparent metrics and world-class execution. As CFO, Matt spearheads communicating ChartHop's story in a compelling way to investors and the broader market. Before ChartHop, he served as the CFO at Roadster, where he gained experience leading financial services, implementing effective fundraising, and guiding operational improvement. Matt, thank you very much for joining me on today's episode.
Thank you, Megan. It's great to be here.
Yeah, today we'll be hearing about your journey as a CFO and learning about your current organization, ChartHop. We'll also be discussing topics such as the role of CFO in storytelling, managing high-growth companies, and ensuring their success. I'm really looking forward to learning from you, so let's get started.
Excellent. Sounds great.
As always, let's start with you and your journey to how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Happy to do that. So I started my career, as I think a lot of CFOs and finance folks do, in investment banking. Did that for the better part of a decade. Then spent some time in some large corporates abroad mostly. And then moved into sort of finance leadership at startups in around 2015. Most recently, prior to coming to ChartHop, I was the CFO of another SaaS company called Roadster, which we led a successful exit there in the middle of 2021. And I joined ChartHop as CFO back in January. So I've been with the company for about 9 months.
And just out of curiosity, is ChartHop remote right now? Is everybody working remotely?
We are, and it's actually been that way since the beginning. We made the decision early on to be a fully remote company.
Okay.
And so a lot of the things that we do with the product and also culturally is set up to sort of cultivate that and get employees engaged when there is no office.
Yeah, that can't be easy. How was it transitioning into the role of CFO remotely?
Yeah, so actually, I did that in my last company actually,
Okay.
and we went into COVID as an in-office company. And learned very quickly how to plan and operate a business from a very decentralized leadership team. I think it's probably not too surprising, but what it's going to be is it's constant communication, excellent visibility into an organization, and really coming out of that experience at my last company, when I was looking for something new, I found ChartHop and loved the product, and it was one of those moments where you say to yourself, I wish I had this at my last company and every other company that I've been working for. Because what we do at ChartHop as a sort of people operations analytics platform, really give management and employees a view into an organization, both from sort of an organizational structure perspective, from a compensation perspective, from a DEIB perspective, all those different angles, much more visibility than we've had historically. And that's really what attracted me to the company. And so the product itself, actually coming on as CFO at ChartHop, has made my job a little bit easier, to be honest.
So who is the ideal client for ChartHop?
So we like to think that any company with people is a good candidate for ChartHop. There is a certain size at which organizational planning, compensation planning becomes more challenging. So really kind of above maybe 100, 150 people is where we start hitting our sweet spot, but we can go into the multiple thousands and beyond. So it really, I think when we started out, we were focused, probably not surprisingly, on sort of smaller, high growth companies, because I think headcount planning there is such a critical piece of operational planning that we found a lot of early traction there. But as we've come to see, larger organizations are also always looking to optimize, looking to restructure teams to maximize productivity, and the product's really great for that as well.
Does it sit on top of an ERP or does it work separately?
So it integrates with a number of different systems. So it integrates with payroll, it integrates with HRISs, it integrates with equity systems, but it also goes beyond that and integrates with things. We can integrate with operational systems, customer service systems, sales systems. And by bringing in all that data and using the org chart in some ways as the visual sort of front end to look at teams. And so you can look at things like sales quotas, or you can look at team diversity makeup and reporting lines and compensation structures and where do people fit in different bands. You can look at tenure. You can look at all these different organizational and demographic metrics and really make more informed decisions about how you structure and operate teams within a company. But really, it pulls in data from a number of different systems, and it's meant to be an open platform. We want to be able to connect to various systems across organizations, bring all that data in, connect it to the people that are producing and using that data, and giving a view into an organization that I said, really hasn't existed before.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it basically allows you to slice and dice information in ways that you've never been able to before.
That's right. And the other thing that allows us to do is run scenarios on that information. And so if we want to look at, for example, headcount planning in a certain team, we can we look at the org chart and kind of visually add new roles. And then there are obviously tables that exist behind that. But with the ability to create scenarios and then look at what that does to your overall cost structure, what that does to your quota structure, you can basically, kind of said, kind of slice and dice the data in a very engaging and visual way, but one that doesn't kind of give up analytical rigor for kind of that really important UX element.
So you've been with ChartHop now for 9 months. How,
that's right.
Looking back 9 months ago, how is it that you were able to hit the ground running?
Yeah, so I think one of the nice things that it is a SaaS platform, and that's something that I understand. And so the economics of the business were fairly straightforward. But I think what I was looking for when coming into the company, and I think this is kind of what I always look for, is an executive team that engages and looks at finance as a strategic part of the executive team, and was eager to work with me when I came in on budgeting and planning and optimizing and process optimization. And in my conversations with the team, as I was interviewing with ChartHop, I just got the sense across the board that the team was very aligned, all rowing in the same direction, and was very eager to bring on finance leadership to kind of help continue the journey and work towards the ultimate goals here.
And what have been your proudest achievements since joining?
So, I think that there are a few, actually. So right when I first joined, we acquired a small YC company called Gather. That was like within a couple of weeks. And so I brought a great team on board and kind of developed that acquisition muscle memory within the company. We pretty quickly put in a very full-fledged budgeting and planning process. And the team was very receptive to that. So I was very pleased that I was able to kind of come in, talk to the team, explain why we were doing budgeting the way that we were doing it, share the models with them. They were, as I said, they were kind of eager to understand and eager to engage on that. And so ultimately it was a relatively painless process to put in place, even though one really hadn't been there before I joined. And then I think, ultimately it's we've continued to grow the company. It's certainly not been the easiest environments in the most recent months, but I've been just truly impressed with the way the exec team and the overall employee base has responded, has really dug in, and it's just a group I feel very proud to be part of.
And earlier this year, you announced ChartHop's first acquisition. Was that Gather?
That was, yes.
Okay. So can you speak a little bit to what went into that and how the integration is going and advice for successfully integrating?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about that. As I said, it was a smaller YC company that had a very complementary product that a small and sort of very high-powered team had developed. It was really around sort of actions and automating certain event notifications around sort of people milestones in an organization. And they had also built up a really great community of HR professionals that were sharing ideas, and they were really facilitating these conversations. And so a really great team of both on the marketing side in terms of community engagement, very strong team on the product and engineering side, and was an area of our product that we wanted to continue to enhance. And so I think it was just very complimentary when we brought them in. In terms of a kind of advice, it was it's acquisitions all have their own flavor, even if you've done a bunch of them either as as an advisor or on the inside of a company. I think it's the most sort of important perspective to have going into an acquisition is that it will look different at the end than what you anticipate it to be at the beginning, because all sorts of things come up. Sometimes good, sometimes more challenging, but it's remaining adaptable and understanding that all these transactions are different and include their own sort of unique challenges around just whether it's around structuring, whether it's around technology. I think we were fortunate to bring in a really great team of people, and they were just wonderful to work with. And I think that's also really important, is to have executive alignment, that the objectives are very clear and the reasons for doing the deal are very clear to both the acquired company and to people internally, really. I think it's something that not all employees go through, especially at a relatively early stage startup. And so, you want to be communicating and explaining kind of the strategic rationale as to why the deal is being done. And from what I've seen, we've brought in some really wonderful people, and it's been a good benefit for us.
And we hear a lot today about the role of CFO as a storyteller. So, what's the key to being able to tell a company story in a compelling way to investors and the broader market?
So I think that what I've found is to be the most sort of helpful, and it's probably will not be kind of the most unique idea, but it really is, and it's something that I enjoy doing, is getting engaged with every team in the company, because everyone, obviously, as you can imagine, is contributing something to the overall story and the overall progress and growth of the company. So that sales or marketing or CX, people ops, I tend to work very closely with those teams to really understand how they're operating. I don't look at finance as being sort of strictly a budgeting function. I look at it as a much more operational role, much more strategic role. And I want to have those very frank conversations. I want leadership of other teams to feel very comfortable talking to me about challenges and opportunities, and giving them frameworks to think through how to think about whether it's investment or other decisions, and then getting involved in those decisions to the extent that can be helpful. But I think having that sort of granular knowledge of how certain teams operate, when you sort of step back and put it all together into a story about who we are, what we're trying to accomplish, and how we're going to accomplish it, you just have much, much deeper context to do that.
That's great advice. And ChartHop has plans for rapid growth this year and beyond. So what advice do you have for other CFOs who are managing high growth organizations?
Sure. No, I think, again, kind of going back to transactions, or just in kind of the overall kind of philosophy around finance leadership, is it's just to be adaptable. And it's that, be rigorous in your planning, be hyper analytical, so that when things don't go according to plan, whether above or below, you understand why they didn't go towards plan. And knowing the details around that allows you to adapt one way or the other. So it's, sales are over plan for a particular reason, and everyone's going to celebrate that. But really, why is it happening? Were we too conservative in one of our assumptions? Did something else happen that we hadn't anticipated? And I think that the overall, what I tell my team, or what I tell the overall company, is let's reduce surprises, either to the upside or the downside, as much as we possibly can. And in a high growth company, you just have more surprises because things are just happening faster. You're hiring people faster, your product is changing faster, your growth rates are just going to be faster. So you're adding new customers, new customer types, and you're sort of seeing for the first time in a lot of ways, how things change when certain variables are altered. And so I think it's being prepared to sort of deal with that uncertainty in a way that is constructive to the business. I think when we talk to our teams overall and talk to the company at like an all hands, I think it's okay to say that we didn't know something was going to happen or we didn't expect it to happen this way. But here's how we're responding to it. So it's having the second answer, to not say that, hey, we were surprised and we're still trying to figure it out. That may be the case, but figure it out quickly. But I think it's being ready to in accepting that things just are not going to sort of pan out the way that you expect them to, and to have enough of a granular knowledge and understanding of what you expected to happen to kind of identify and kind of pattern recognize when things don't. And I also think that the other piece is being able to communicate across departments and across teams, so that when things are, even if they're going to plan, why are things happening? And having very frank conversations. I have weekly one-on-ones with all of our VPs. And I really do try to understand what they're seeing so they can understand what I'm seeing across the organization. So I see finance really as sort of the funnel point for all of that information that goes into operational performance, and being able to communicate and kind of elevate them above their specific teams to say, okay, well, this is what we're seeing over in, if I'm talking to someone in CX, well, this is what we're seeing over in marketing, and making sure that everyone is aligned and again, no one is surprised.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned there, just being able to work across the organization is so important these days. I think that's a big factor in the evolution of the CFO. Whereas 20 years ago, maybe you could work in a silo. It's not possible anymore.
Right. No, I think that's right. It would make my job impossible, actually, if I was just kind of creating spreadsheets and operational plans without really regular input and interaction with people across the company.
So as the company is maturing from startup to something more mature, how is it that you ensure that your processes and technology can scale with the business?
Sure. I think the first thing you have to do is document things. It's at the beginning when everything is sort of running at light speed. It's easy to sort of make ad hoc decisions and one-offs, but you find that over time you're making just too many one-off decisions, and everyone is coming to you for, well, how do you want to do this? How do you want to do that? And so I think the earlier you can begin documenting processes and giving people guidance that doesn't have to come from you verbally is infinitely helpful. And those plans will change over time. Those processes will change over time. But putting them in place as early as possible so people have a reference and can begin to understand sort of the operational cadence. You asked another question as well.
Process and technology.
Technology, sorry. I'm going to edit that out. So, and as regards systems, I think I'm always looking ahead. And it may seem like certain systems are really expensive at the time, but looking at it from an ROI perspective and saying, look, it's going to cost us X right now and or maybe X on an annual basis, but what do we get out of that? Is it error reduction? Is it time savings? Is it more efficient hiring plans? It really is sort of taking all of that into consideration when thinking about systems, and also eliminating redundancy and increasing integration between systems. And so it's what I also like to avoid is buying point solutions that will need to come out at a certain point in time because something else is going to replace it in a more unified way. And so it's always looking at, can we continue to use this, or will we move to something else in, say, a year or two? And does that mean when we replace that one system, we'll have to replace 3 or 4? Or does something we're buying today continue to be useful into the future? And I try to be as forward-looking as possible with that. And also try to see how we can standardize those systems across teams. Every kind of team has their own preferred way of doing things, and every team leadership has their own preferred way of doing things. And the more we can consolidate and get people working on consistent platforms, I think that sets an operational tone, so that when new people come into the company or move around in between teams, they aren't having to learn tools with those moves. You develop an expertise that I think can sometimes be underrated.
And of course, one of the beautiful things about a startup is that entrepreneurial spirit. So how do you maintain that spirit while still managing risks?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, is the bottom line, right? Because I think you can do things at 10 to 20 people that you can't have 200 people doing. It becomes chaos, right? But I still think one of the nice things about startups, and the reason that people come to work for them, is because they have immediate impact. They have the ability to influence how a product or a process gets built or implemented. And so even as we scale to hundreds of people, leadership still has to give their reports some autonomy around how they go about their day-to-day within sort of the confines of a framework of how we're going to operate as an overall organization. And so giving product teams enough leeway so that they feel like they're still influencing the product. They're not just being told what to build. I think, giving marketing teams flexibility with the budget, and so that, they are empowered and enabled to go and spend in a way that they best see fit at that time, so that they feel like they are able to make decisions, and that keeps people engaged. What I think you just don't want to do is, when you go from a early startup to a large organization, is to have people feel like their roles are being diminished, their voices aren't being heard, because ultimately that's why you come to an organization that is moving quickly. It's that you like that environment, you like that atmosphere, and you like the interactions with your colleagues that come with that. And I think it's incumbent on managers to be very focused. Are they, asking their teams for things, or are they telling them how to do things? And I think that it's a kind of a fine line to walk, because again, there will be more processes, there will be more sort of approvals and things that are needed for certain decisions. But I like to think of it as like making sure that people's fingerprints are still on things that they're working on.
Yeah, I think people want to feel purpose in what it is they're doing.
Exactly. That's right.
And you may have just answered this, or at least touched on it, but as a financial leader, what's the key to cultivating an environment that ensures employees have the right resources to succeed, particularly in a remote environment?
Yeah. So I think, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about, selecting tools and platforms and things. But I say, when I come into organizations, I say my job as the CFO is to ensure that everyone has the resources needed to do their jobs effectively. And whether that's the right people on teams, whether it's the right software products, whatever it happens to be. And as we get into a remote environment, that becomes even more challenging, because, everyone's working in a very different environment. Their home, right? And so I think you have to be open to listening to people. It's things that work in an office environment. I think we're kind of 3 years into this. We're getting there. And I think we're still finding ways to make that experience better. We're still finding ways that the existing tools can be used in sort of new ways to increase employee engagement, increase communication. And I also think you need to, even in a remote environment, you need to ensure that there is still human contact, right? And so we do things like all hands meetings where we bring everyone together. We do smaller sort of regional events. So while people are working from home, they have a chance to know someone beyond just a Zoom screen or just a video conference. And so I think it's listening to people, understanding how people are efficient in a home environment or a co-working environment versus an office environment where you just have more control over really everything. And there are going to be trade-offs. I think the remote environment requires just may require more meetings because you don't have the opportunity to overhear things and just kind of drop a comment into something you overheard or just stop by really quickly to someone's desk or whatever. And so, it's being sort of cognizant of that, but also respectful of people's time so that it isn't just meeting after meeting after meeting. So it can feel that way sometimes. And so I think it's important to sort of lay some ground rules as well, so that people have, as you asked about resources, but I think, their time is ultimately their most valuable resource. And so it's giving them kind of the tools, but it's also giving them the space to do their work.
And what is one or maybe 2 to 3 of the biggest challenges you and your team are facing this quarter? And what are you guys doing to help solve that challenge?
It's a good question.
How's talent? How is it? How are you guys finding and retaining top talent?
Yeah. So it's a good question. And I think we've done a remarkable job of bringing talent. I think we offer a lot as a company from a cultural perspective. Working in the HR space, you're very, kind of acutely aware of how people feel about an organization. We use our own product internally. So we do everything from, one-on-ones to performance reviews to everything using that tool. So we try to keep a really good pulse on our organizational health, the happiness of our employees, how they're engaged. I think, that's always going to be a challenge just because as I said earlier, we're in a remote environment and you don't see people every day. So I think it's really important that you find ways to stay engaged. I think being remote, it allows us to find talent in areas that we wouldn't have if we were in office culture. So I think that's been a huge benefit. We found some wonderful folks in markets that we just wouldn't have been in otherwise. I think on the flip side, as the sort of work from home environment shifts a little bit, some companies are going back to the office, some are still work from home, some are hybrid models. People coming out of the last couple of years, people are going to figure out what works best for them. Some people like being in an office, some really don't. Some like the flexibility, some like the camaraderie that comes about from being in an office. And so, we're certainly dealing with those challenges. I think all organizations are to some extent just because of where we've been the last couple of years. But, I think we do that very effectively. And part of the way we do that is through our own platform. But then it's also making sure that you're recognizing achievements and rewarding accomplishments in a way that is visible to the organization when you're not in an office. And that's how I think we've helped retain some of our best talent, because we're not shy about, at our kind of regular all hands meetings, celebrating that. And people want to feel like, to your earlier point, that they have purpose in an organization. And I think it's important to acknowledge and recognize that those purposes are being, we recognize that as a leadership, as an executive team, and as a company. So certainly challenges around talent, like every company has, but I think we've navigated that quite successfully in a lot of ways. Continue to improve, and we'll continue to look for ways to be better. But I feel wonderful about the people that are at ChartHop. I think we've got just an amazing team, so that's kind of where that is.
Yeah, ChartHop sounds like an innovative, fun place to work.
It is. I think we're doing something. It's interesting when you're building a platform that hasn't really existed before. So you're kind of defining a market niche that for the first time, and that comes with its own challenges, but also its own rewards. When you really can shape the language and sort of shape the philosophy around a new market.
And lastly, what advice do you have for CFOs who are looking to drive strategic value and make a real impact at their organization?
Yeah, I think you have to build relationships across the company in a way that when you need to make decisions as a CFO, and ultimately a lot of decisions do come down to you, you have to be able to, one, take the the perspective of other teams into account, work that into your decision process, and then be able to explain why you made a decision in a certain way. If you can't do that, it just seems like you're making decisions either based on opinion or with incomplete information or even arbitrarily. That's going to, it's going to start to break down. And I think it all comes down to trust. So you need to have very strong trust relationships between all parts of the company. And without that, you will be operating in a vacuum, and it can be a very lonely role. And so you want to make sure that you have, if not the support, but hopefully the support, but if not the support, at least the understanding of your executive peers as to why decisions are being made, and then make those decisions, in consultation with your other C-level counterparts.
It's great advice, Matt. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you, Megan. This is great. I really appreciate the time. It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed speaking with you and hearing about your experiences and the resulting insights. And I wish you and ChartHop all the best. Sounds like you're both doing some amazing things.
Thank you so much.
To all of our listeners, please tune in next week. And until then, take care.
If you're ready to boost efficiency and streamline your accounting processes at significant cost savings, it's time to talk with Personiv. Their people-powered solutions have transformed the delivery of back-office tasks and general accounting functions for decades, partnering with clients to provide everything from accounts payable to payroll services. See what Personiv can do for you by visiting personiv.com.
You've been listening to CFO Weekly, presented by Personiv. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to hear all of our episodes. Want to learn more? Check out personiv.com. Thanks for listening.